Number one foreign policy issue that our country and the world faces at this point in time concerns the Iran issue. I want to make a comment up front. I am not Iranian, as you can plainly see. I do not speak Farsi. I'm not an Iranian scholar, but I have followed the Iran issue for about going on, I don't know, maybe 5 years. And you might ask, well, why do I focus on Iran? It's really quite simple. I simply do not want what happens to Iran that happened to Iraq. And I think that I hope that you will agree with me. I thought that we ought to, in order to get us all on the same page, I want to have a few things about context, and the first item has to do with a video that probably a lot of you have seen, and that's the video done by Rick Steves for PBS, and he did this, in 2000? Anyway, I'd like to have shown about 6 minutes of that video. So Cindy is going to start it.
Public television special?
It's the PBS, right, special. The thing that I particularly wanted to have shown is the reception that Rick Steves got when he went to do that. And by the way, how many of you have seen this DVD before, or Rick's program on television? Some of you, say if you're out of town, would not have seen it, but I'm sure, say Seattleites, you probably have seen it more than once. But it demonstrates some things particularly that I want to have us be clear about. The Iranian people as a whole have a very warm spot for us as Americans in their heart. And I hope that you know Iranians, that you can realize this. I hope you'll know a number of pieces about context. One is that Iran has not started a war anywhere within the past, how many years? 250 years. That's a long time, especially when you compare it, say, to the wars that we have started. In 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh was elected prime minister, and the same time, the British American Oil Company was nationalized. Now, that's a big step for Iran. It's a big step in a lot of countries. Now, 2 years later, then, Mossadegh was overthrown. Do you know who overthrew him? Yes.
We sent Kermit Roosevelt.
Exactly. Yes.
The CIA.
And okay.
And he fomented unrest.
Exactly. Yes. And what country was in on that? It was
United States.
And Britain. Yes, United States and Britain. Do you link that to the British American Oil Company being nationalized? No. Okay. Yeah. I think we're pretty clear about that. Who was the choice then to be the leader of? Who was our choice?
The Shah.
The Shah. Okay. What do you know about the Shah?
He had terror squads.
He had terror squads. He was a real menace. Yes.
Was he in power before and then
His father was. Yes. Yeah. And so he ruled until 1979, and that's the time that the first Ayatollah came into power, and his name was what? Khomeini. Okay. I pronounce it Khomeini, but his successor is Khamenei, isn't it? Okay, and I decided to put that down because Khomeini was the supreme leader from 1979 to 1989, a little over 10 years, and then in 1989, Ali Khamenei became the supreme leader, and he is the guy who is in charge of things, basically. What's going on today? How many of you know what's taking place today? Yes.
Well, you mean today?
Starting today.
Well, I don't know about today, but recently Khamenei did a fatwa saying they would not develop nuclear weapons.
he reiterated that fatwa, and that fatwa was reported in the Washington Post and the New York Times yesterday. Today they are having a meeting, and where's that being held? In Istanbul, Turkey. And I expect that Jim is going to say more about that, so I won't cover that at this point. What happened on November 4th, 1979?
I think the British embassy was burned.
Okay.
In Iran.
Well, it may have been,
Sister was over there.
but it's a little closer to our hearts. Okay, that's when the militant students seized the U.S. Embassy, and they held 52 of our embassy staff for over a year. What was Jimmy Carter's response to that? He organized a group, a team, a couple of teams to go in by helicopters and try to seize them. It ended in disaster. There were several deaths. But then what happened finally? Okay, that's correct. Yeah. Okay, and what are the next steps that happened?
They were released.
They were released.
For his inauguration.
Okay, but what was the precipitating? What helped to achieve that release? Anybody know? Contra arms. Okay, so we sent arms. We said, okay, we will provide weapons for you. And there was some appeal to that. And so all of those hostages were released. None of them were killed. I mean, yes, it was a very traumatic period of time for over a year. So what happened, the next big thing happened in 1980, and it also had, yes, sir?
Excuse me, just before you go on to 80, was there any deal cut before, there's talk about some deal cut by the Reagan administration before they even took office? See any evidence of that?
Yeah, I can't answer that. Jim may be able to, but let's move on. I don't want us to, otherwise we won't get through our agenda. But from 1980 to 1988 was the Iran-Iraq War, wasn't it? Do you know about that? How many casualties did Iran suffer? It was over 1 million casualties. What are some of the things that Iraq used? Like WMD, is poison gas. Where'd they get the components from for that? Rumsfeld. You nailed it. You nailed it. Exactly. We are the country that encouraged that dreadful war that went on from 1980 to 1988. Who started it? Iraq started. Exactly. Okay. Hey, you guys are way ahead of us. So, 2003, George W. Bush. Okay, he said some things about Iran. Okay, what about the axis of evil? Iran was labeled one of the axis of evil. He also rejected out of hand a peace offer in 2003 that Iran put forward. Now, of course, we didn't have diplomatic relations, so Iran offered this peace deal through the Swiss embassy, and what did George W. Bush said? He said he rejected it out of hand, and he let the Swiss embassy know that he was displeased about that offer, that they had sent that peace offer to them. Not a very nice thing to do. 2005, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, I pronounce it slightly different than the U.S. media does. I won't get into that. But he was elected president for a 4-year term. He was reelected. You will recall that, I think, in 2009. The loser was who? Mousavi with the Green Party. Do you know where Mousavi is at this point? He is under house arrest or in prison. I don't know which. I'm going to have to keep moving right along. Ahmadinejad is kind of a rascal. I think you'd agree with me. but he has been accused repeatedly of saying that the country of Israel has got to be destroyed. And I heard this said on NPR by the Israeli ambassador to the United States. And anyway, he did not say that. He was repeating what had been said by an Ayatollah that said that the country of Israel, I'm sorry, not the country, the government of Israel should be thrown into the dustbin of history. And I have seen the details of that statement in Farsi and in English, word for word. That is accurate. You know, the population of Iran is about 3 times that of Iraq. It's much larger. It is a Shia democracy. It has 80% literacy. That's not too bad. 80% literacy. And once more, we have some women here. Okay. Do you know what the majority of figure is for women in universities? It is 60% of the university students are women. The formal name of Iran is the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the final authority resides with the Ayatollah, that present Ayatollah Khamenei. It is called a democracy, but it also has Sharia law. I think it's pertinent to note. Last month I heard a professor from Stanford, his name is Abbas Milani, and he said that it is clear that democracy and Sharia law are simply incompatible. They are not compatible. So there are some continuing problems. I want to go out and talk about human rights for a couple of minutes. How many of you have heard of Shirin Ebadi? Shirin Ebadi is the first Iranian woman and the first Muslim to be honored to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and that was for the rights of women and children and refugees. She had an article in the New York Times a couple of days ago, and she feels genuinely harassed by the government of Iran. She said they want to kill me. I'm sure that they have said that directly to her. She is not welcome in her own country. What I'm saying is that, yes, Iran has some major problems with human rights. The human rights, the United Nations Council on Human Rights has appointed a special rapporteur specifically for Iran. And he has recently made an appeal to Iran to ban the death penalty in cases that don't meet standards of serious crime as defined by international law. I suggest that we look at Iran from the context, however, of the fact that there are other problems, other countries that have problems, particularly I'm thinking of the United States. I think of the human rights problem that we created with the Iraq War, with a million deaths as estimated by epidemiologists. I want to have us recall of the birth defects, which I have seen when I went to Iraq in 2002. I want you to recall the execution of people like Troy Davis, who was executed last September despite strong evidence to the contrary. So here in the United States, I think you'll all agree with me that we have a long ways to go when we're talking about human rights, especially in the days of Troy Davis's, in the days of drones and so forth. Here we've got a lot of work to do. Speaking of human rights, I'll just insert a little bit that I consider has to do with human rights of the population, of the people. A couple of months ago, a survey was reported by University of Maryland, Shibli Telhani and Stephen Cull. They found there was a survey in Israel of the population. It was 503 people, and they were looking at the the attitudes toward nuclear weapons in their country and in the Middle East, and they found that a remarkable 64% of the people they interviewed, they said they would like to see the Middle East, the whole Middle East, be a weapons of mass destruction free zone, including their own country having no nuclear weapons. That's 64%. I need to spend a couple of minutes on the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and I will simply call that the NPT, again, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And the agency that administers that follows through with the countries, its name is IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. That's been signed by 190 countries, including the 5 nuclear weapons states, who are also, of course, then the permanent members of the UN Security Council. There are, however, 3 powers that have not signed the NPT that have nuclear weapons. What are those states? Israel, okay, and Israel has up to 200 nuclear weapons, and it's interesting that they started making their nuclear weapons in 1958. I won't go into details, but Mordecai, anyway, I can't think of his last name at the moment, Mordecai Vanunu was imprisoned for many years for having tattled on that, and yes, he is free. He is free to travel in Israel at this point. The other 2 states are Pakistan and India that have not signed it. Furthermore, you will be aware, of course, that North Korea did sign it, but they withdrew from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The NIE, the National Intelligence Estimate of 2003, said that Iran had made the decision not to proceed with the development of nuclear weapons. And someone, you nailed it, about the fatwa that was reissued, that is that nuclear weapons are contrary to the Muslim faith. So another problem that has arisen just recently that is picked up by Israel has to do with a new location for reprocessing the uranium, and that is it's called the Fordo facility, and that is in the south, just a bit south of Tehran, and it's under a mountain. And the defense minister of Israel is not at all happy with that, because it's a zone of immunity, because they cannot destroy it by an aerial attack at this point. So they're quite unhappy about that. A couple of comments about the International Atomic Energy Agency. The previous Director General was Mohammed El-Baradei. And El-Baradei was from Egypt, is from Egypt. He had some problems with Israel because he felt they were not allowing the inspectors to go in and inspect all of the facilities. They were holding back, but he never accused them of proceeding to make nuclear weapons. The present Director General, who has been there for 2 years, his name is Yukiya Amano. He's from Japan. He is felt to be not terribly fair in his evaluations toward Iran. Robert Kelly, anybody remember his name from the Iraq War? He headed the team in Iraq looking for nuclear weapons. He is worrying about the parallels between the West's mistakes over Iraq's proposed nuclear weapons, expected nuclear weapons, which of course were never found. Another person who has problems with Amano is a comment by Mohammed El-Baradei. He said that Amano focuses on suspicions that are used without vigorous debate. That is, it will not surprise you when I say that. Let's hold comments and questions for a couple of minutes yet. There's got to be vigorous debate on issues, and not just base it on what the conservative elements are saying. A further person is Hans Blix, and I hope you'll recall Hans Blix. He was the Director General of IAEA, and he said, there is a distinction between information and evidence, and the Director General must make certain that conclusions are not based on information which has not been verified. Joe Cirincione of Plowshares has made similar comments. Looking at geopolitical relationships, I think the number one issue of relationships between countries is the U.S. to Israel. And I would point out a book which I hope many of you have seen, and this is the book, The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy by John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt at Harvard. Mearsheimer's from University of Chicago. They have pointed out in the first chapter, they said that the total economic and military aid as of 2005 amounted to nearly $154 billion to Israel. That's cumulative up until 2005. That was on average about $3 billion a year. And the $3 billion, when it comes to how much does that amount to for each Israeli, it comes to $500 per Israeli. Anybody know how much we give to Haiti? It's no, well, it is $27. But when you compare $27 as against $500, you know that something's wrong. Furthermore, that $3 billion is an understatement, and this was revealed by a representative from India, and he said the total actually amounts to $4.3 billion per year. That's in their book of Mearsheimer and Walt's book that was published in 2007. Roughly 1/3 of all seaborne oil shipments goes through the Gulf of Hormuz, and I hope you have seen maps of where that Gulf is. It's a very comparatively narrow place through which all of that 1/3 of the world's oil supplies. That's a lot, and it would be easy to stop that. And Iran has said, we don't like your sanctions, and we are going to mine the Gulf of Hormuz so that the ships can't pass through. And the U.S., as I hope you know, they have said, well, don't do that, we will remove them. I think I would want to say that Iran has has the largest missile provision of any country in the Middle East. And if you're a sailor on one of our aircraft carriers in the Gulf, I think if I was one, I wouldn't want to, I'd feel rather uncomfortable, because Russia has supplied missiles that travel 2,000 miles an hour. And I can't imagine that a U.S. aircraft carrier would not be a sitting duck. I think they'd be a sitting duck as an easy prey to be attacked in case, if war breaks out. I'll skip over a few things. Sanctions, I hope you're aware of the increasing degree of sanctions that have started originally in the year 2000. And that was when they demanded, the UN Security Council demanded that Iran cease reprocessing uranium. That has been ramped up a number of times. And so at 2 months ago, the United States said to Israel, you've got to, we're shutting down your central bank. I'll keep moving on. I'd like just for a couple of minutes to talk about battle preparedness between the three countries that are involved here. One is, obviously, is the United States, another is Israel, and a third is Iran. U.S. preparedness, you'll be aware that we have aircraft carriers there. I would expect that we would have submarines easily that could go in that area if they're not there now. But how many of you know about Diego Garcia? Diego Garcia is located about 1,000 miles south of India, and it's right there. It's a small island that belongs to the Brits. The United States has been there and has a large military base. It has submarines, it has bombers, and these submarines are equipped to carry Tomahawk missiles with nuclear warheads. The United States has recently sent 387 bunker-busting bombs to Diego Garcia. But these are not adequate to make a dent on that mountain, so the United States would have to do something more vigorous. And that vigorous capacity lies with the MOP, that is the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, which weighs 30,000 pounds. By the way, it has been manufactured by what company? By Boeing. Okay, but there's a problem with that. With these mountains, it cannot go through. It'll explode before it would get to the reprocessing. So Boeing's got to do some further design on that so that it will penetrate and keep going and not explode until it gets farther in there. These steps are underway. Chomsky had an article not long ago, and he talked about, one of the things he said, that U.S. bombers and long-range missiles are ready today to destroy 10,000 targets in Iran in just a few hours. 10,000. So these are preparations that have been carried out by our military, and they're not joking. They could do that. I do not believe they want to do that. And let's talk about Israeli preparedness. Israel's military capability is far stronger than Iran's, far stronger. And there's a reason for that. And you recall that however many $1 billion that they get every year from us, 2/3 of which are for military preparedness. So Israel, I had previously thought if they were going to attack Iran, what they would do is to have their bombers fly from Israel and fly over from here to Iran. Right there, there's Tehran, and so there's Qom, where Fordo is, that the new facility, and they could fly that 1,100 miles, but they would have to have tankers refuel them because they've only got two aerial tankers, so they couldn't make it. That's a problem for them. But I've learned more recently that Iran has purchased 3 submarines from Germany that carry nuclear weapons, that can carry, and I'm sure that from Israel, I'm sorry, yes, thank you for correcting me. So two of those submarines are in the Gulf of Hormuz. and they're on the ready. The other major development that has become evident just within the past couple of weeks that I have seen it is that relationships between Israel and Azerbaijan. Here's Tehran and Iran right here, and here is Azerbaijan right here, with Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, right there. So Israel has been selling things, armaments and other things to Azerbaijan. They have sold drones and other things. And in return, Azerbaijan has said to Israel, you can use some of the air bases that we're not using. We have 3 air bases that you could use. And so at this point, Israel has the capability of flying their bombers from Israel, and they could land at Azerbaijan, which is, instead of 1,100 miles, is from Tehran to Baku, is only about 400 miles, even less. I don't know where those are located, but a fairly short distance. So that totally changes the equation. Iran doesn't have to rely on getting those bombers to fly all the way back. They could use their submarines. They could have the bombers land or from in Azerbaijan. Israel's preparedness. So they have a great advantage there. Iranian preparedness, according to the January 31st assessment of James Clapper, who is the Director of National Intelligence, Iran already has the largest inventory, I said this, of ballistic missiles in the Middle East, and is expanding the scale and sophistication. Just in conclusion, I wanted to read a comment by Leslie Gelb, who was the President Emeritus of the Council of Foreign Relations. He said, if we've learned anything at all from plunging into war in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, it's this. We must have a public scrubbing of the fighting rhetoric before, not after, a war begins. In every major war of the last decades, the public assumed the government and the experts knew what they were talking about and proposing to do. But that faith has collapsed, and it has collapsed with me long ago, and I think it's collapsed with you. We could take a few questions at this point. Yes, I saw his...